Rana Drill Weekly Podcast.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Shuaib. I'm moderator of Rana Drill Weekly Podcast, in which we'll shed light on several topics, including decarbonization, promote innovative solutions in the oil and gas industry. We'll talk about the role of technology to support the global strategy by reducing carbon footprint, sharing advanced solutions in upstream and downstream. And let's say we'll talk about the pivotal role of fossils to booster the petrochemistry and many industrial activities. So let's say how to produce energy with less carbon emissions. Our objective through this podcast is to enlighten the professionals of the energy sector with deep analysis by sharing both technical and economic know-how. Starting with you, Mr. Dr. Thomas O'Donnell is an energy geopolitical expert, global fellow of Wilson Center in Washington, and he has long analyzed the global oil and gas sector and difficulties of the energy transition. And you like this topic, I believe. In his university seminars and blog, he's an American based in Berlin and regularly provides expert commentary for international TV and print media. So welcome on board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
It's great to be here talking to you in Algiers.
Okay. Thank you very much. In the other side, I have the great pleasure to welcome you, Osama Rizvi. Yeah, Osama Rizvi.
Yes, Osama Rizvi, absolutely, yes.
Perfect. He's an energy and an economic analyst at Primary Vision Network and founder of Rizvi Insight. He's based in Lahore. So glad to see you here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So in our first session today, we'll talk about decarbonization in the oil and gas industry and how companies are balancing between investment in oil and gas extraction in one side and how they support the heavy burden exercised from several parties to curb emissions, as the oil and gas industry is participating with roughly 90% of global carbon emissions. So allow me to start with you, Mr. Thomas O'Donnell. So let's say that fossils are by far the largest contributors to global climate change, accounting for over 75% of global greenhouse gas emissions and roughly 90% of all carbon dioxide emissions. My question is, so meanwhile, let me say that oil and gas operations, I have to shed light on this, operations of oil and gas account for 15% of total energy-related emissions globally. So the decarbonization efforts requires a large-scale investment in technology, which is really expensive, and because it's covering parts of R&D. So, Mr. Thomas, do you think that, or do you believe that firms with only their own efforts can really succeed to lessen the share of 15% of, 15% in operations by 2050 without relying with government subsidies?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead.
Now, here's the thing. This is about how the company operates. There's been, for at least 20 years, but actually for much longer, there's been a back and forth about what is optimism, pessimism, what oil companies can do to lessen their carbon footprints.
Yes.
When you're essentially an oil company or a gas company, you're producing oil and gas. And it's not like, they could just decide to produce less oil and gas. That's what really a lot of activists, but also governments then under the pressure of activists, I would say oftentimes it's sort of a populist pressure. It looks like there's a simple solution. just somehow make it difficult for the oil and gas companies to produce oil and gas. And that was tried for a while. That was popular for a while. And what happened is after Corona, because of this pressure, but also because of Corona, there wasn't a lot of investment in producing oil and gas, not to mention producing it much more cleanly. And so what happened is you had a bit of a disaster. There wasn't enough oil and gas.
Exactly.
You can't cut it off unless you have something else, because people still want to drive to work and drive to the store and so forth and need industry. So to me, the key thing to decarbonize and to reduce what the oil companies produce, which is carbon, is to actually make the alternatives real. And that's proving to be very difficult. And we could talk about that. Right now, you'll notice a number of the oil companies, British Petroleum comes to mind, have said that, okay, we're going to have to, they'll say, we're going to pursue making profits. This was a mistake. The alternatives aren't ready, okay? And so I think that's realistic. Now, if they want to do something like reduce their own carbon footprint, like every business might want to, on the one hand, people almost always what they say, well, one thing is to prevent leaks. And of course, that's a big deal, especially in the gas industry. You want to prevent leaks. And after all, you make more money if you prevent leaks because you sell more gas and you don't waste it. So that's sort of a no-brainer, but it depends on the country you're in and what the rules and regulations are and if it's a big company or not. The other thing is electrification. And you can electrify a lot of things that are done in oil and gas fields and so forth. But the problem is you have to produce that electricity in a green way. And that's what the world is having a problem with. You might electrify your production in an oil field and find out it's all coming from a coal plant. So what have you gained, right?
Yeah, exactly. So when we talk about fossil energies, we talk about oil, about natural gas, and we talk also about coal. Coal I think, is the big issue, the big emitter of carbon at the moment. And I think we need a lot of effort, I think, to lessen, to curb the emissions from all fossils, but especially I'm talking about coal. Let me talk to you, Osama, about this. So as we mentioned above, and based on the report of International Energy Agency, that 90% of CO2 emissions are coming from fossils. 40% are from coal, 32% from oil, and only 21% from natural gas. So let me highlight that in 2023, the globe consumed more than 8.5 billion tons of coal. This is a huge value which really affecting and let's say impacting the ozone layer. So my question is the decarbonization of oil and gas sector will be enough to limit emissions as we still record high demand on coal?
Well, that is a very interesting question. And I would like to highlight specifically the fact that, coming from a developing part of the world, or the global south, as they say, it's important and interesting to have their perspective in the wider debate around energy transitions and climate crisis, and specifically when we talk about the solutions. So oil and gas, all right, even if we some way, with a magic wand, decarbonize the oil and gas sector, although I don't think it is quite possible, and I'll explain why. Even then, there are so many other things that still require, that will cause carbon emissions. For instance, there is this really good book by Václav Smil called How the World Really Works, and he explains 4 things: plastic, cement, ammonia, and one more thing. I'm forgetting it, but those 4 things are like the building block of civilization. Those 4 things are not a luxury or leisure. Those 4 things are, that are required actually when you are witnessing an improve in living standards. And when you compare living standards between the developed world or the advanced economies and the developing world or the global south, we all know that there is still a lot to be done. When we talk about this part of the world. For instance, there is a need of 400 million homes to be built in Africa over the next decade or so. Even in Pakistan, we talk about the number of air conditioning units, you talk about the minimum wage, you talk about the income per capita. So all of these things, and hopefully, and I pray that things improve, as the living standards of people improve, carbon emissions follow naturally. The important point here to ask is that whether we have reached a point where there has been a decoupling between economic growth and energy emissions. So unfortunately, and I might be wrong, but so far I think we have not reached that point. Up until a certain point, there is a direct correlation between emissions and economic growth. So to answer, coming back to your question, Shoaib, even if first of all, the idea of decarbonizing oil and gas comes with a lot of political economy, right? What about those people who are working there? What about countries like Pakistan who cannot? Look at the recent Energy Institute statistical review of the year report. It shows that still the global primary energy mix from fossil fuels still accounts for 81% of the share, despite all the talks, despite all the conferences, despite all the pledges. So if countries like Germany, if countries like US, if rich countries like China, other European countries, advanced economies, they have not been able to go completely green. And I'm not talking about only electrification, because electrification maybe accounts for 18 to 20% of the global energy mix, but the rest of the 80% as well.
Because it's a political speech. It's not a
Yes.
It's not a real speech. This is the message, the speech of the politicians.
Yes, so that's the point. So what about this reality? If they have not been able to do it, how can you ask Pakistan? How can you ask Bangladesh? How can you ask countries in Africa, like, hey, stop using oil and gas, let's decarbonize it? What are we going to do about the alternatives? And we talk about the alternatives, I would like to highlight as well. There are inherent limitations to renewable energy systems, right?
Yes.
There is an issue of intermittency. There is an issue, the most important issue is scalability, whether renewable systems have reached a level they can power the whole country. Third, there is an issue of funding, then time and scale. So, it doesn't make sense. I've written a lot on this as well. We really have to reframe the whole narrative and rethink the whole problem. Only then we can reach the right conclusions. If we continue to think in the current framework, I think it's a lost cause then.
Yeah, exactly. When we're talking about the energy transition, we talk a lot about how to decarbonize the industry. But what I really strongly believe that what we need at the moment, we still need oil and gas and coal. This is a reality, because people confuse between renewable energies, between brackets, we get only electricity from them, from solar energy, from wind energy, we get only electricity. But from fossil energies, oil and gas, for example, we get electricity, we get energy, we get the petrochemistry, and we get also fertilizer for the agriculture. So this is what making difference between renewable energies and fossils. Fossils, they give us a larger view on how can we really take profit from petrochemistry and oil, plastic industry. This is a huge industry behind. What I believe, honestly, we have to keep investing in both oil and gas, let's say fossils in one side, and we have to keep investing in renewable energies. We keep investing in renewable energies to be an alternative for the uses of fossil energies in some applications. And by the way, I have to talk about the solutions to decarbonize the oil and gas sector. So, Mr. Thomas, let's say that many solutions have been deployed to find alternatives to fossils prior to curb emissions, but we shelter to fossils in 80% of our energy needs. So one of the vital solutions is to generalize the electrification based on renewables, EV, electrify the industry on the way to get rid of fossils gradually. So can we say that it's okay, we eliminate fossils, but they are because they are pollutants? Is it a reality?
Well, I think our friend Osama made some good points.
Yeah.
this idea, I call it the German model. Give them credit. They came up with a model about, I remember giving a talk at the university in the US, I think it was 2000 or 2001, about there's this new model that the Greens in Germany are promoting and that Europe is excited about. Anyway, they wanted 100% renewables and also no nuclear, right? And and they, so I've been in Germany here now for a while, and most of business, even if the business was, I mean, people in Germany, a high percentage of people realize that global warming is a problem, and they know it's caused by carbon emissions, by fossil fuels, much of it. So they want to do something, but I think most of the businesses were pretty realistic, saying that I don't know how I can run my business on renewables, and it's going to be very expensive. So what was told them, this is as late, it's 2016, when I don't think this was believed anywhere else in the world, the Green Party and later the government here under Merkel told business, look, the world is going to run out of fossil fuel. It's going to be peak oil, peak gas, and we don't have any choice. So you might as well go along and look, Germany exports. It's mainly an exporting country. If you develop all the new technology, the windmills, the solar, you will export it to the world later. It'll be expensive in the meantime. Don't worry, we'll let the working class and the middle class pay for it. We'll subsidize you.
Yeah.
And they did. And we have the most expensive electricity for any developed country. But the problem is it hasn't worked. It's failed. And not only has the price of electricity in Germany gone up, as Osama points out, with renewables, it's very high. In the United States, their competitors, well, of course, it wasn't the end of oil and gas. With fracking, they discovered more oil, more gas, and the price went down. So the gap has killed their competitiveness. So they were relying on Russian gas, and the Russians knew they had them. And then the Russians thought this would be a great weapon when they started their war, and they cut it off. Well, okay, so now they're buying American or Qatari LNG, but it's not so cheap. And the truth is, I think we have to just say very clearly, the 100% renewable project has failed. Germany, okay, let's say, great, you tried it. You are one of the richest countries. You are known for your engineering. People 100% behind it. You can't say they weren't the population. And it's failed, and you have the finance, and you haven't done it, right?
Yeah, because replace it with hydrogen. But what about the petrochemistry? What about the plastic, the rubber, or that stuff? From where we can get that? This is the logic we have to talk about.
Even if you still use natural gas for that, to make that much hydrogen is crazy. And they say, well, of course, now this was just before the elections in 2021 here. They have a group of people who are appointed, professors, a handful of them, who the Bundestag, the parliament says every year or two, you have to review the program and see how we're doing. Well, they said it had failed, that it's not going to be possible to produce enough renewables in Germany to run the country. So they said that means we have to bring it from outside, renewables. So electricity from our neighbors, but they should bring hydrogen from far away, from North Africa. They're really happy with Morocco. Morocco, they think all this is going to happen, but other countries, or from Mauritania or from Qatar, they have all these plans to bring it from Latin America. But I'm sorry, I'm a physicist, and I've worked with hydrogen in the lab. It's not going to work. I've talked to people. This is not a new industry. This industry is well over 100 years old. They make a lot of hydrogen for oil refineries because you need it in oil refineries. And there's not going to be some revolution in producing this. There's been big chemical companies trying to do it efficiently for 100 and something years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
And you can't transport the stuff. So it's a big lie. Really, they realize they have to go back to natural gas. And it would be doing a favor and telling countries like Pakistan and others, I'm not going to give you illusions. We were wrong. But instead, they're coming and say, can you make hydrogen for us?
And and this is the big problem. People, just like they believe the narratives. We have, at the moment, we have technology is existing to produce the hydrogen, but we don't have that technology to transport it for 2,000 kilometers. How can we transport we have the problem of pipe embrittlement. So I cannot really go to the technical side in this podcast, but I tell you, we can produce it, but how can we transport it? It's different. Some people
they have a new idea. They have
yeah,
a new,
because some
said this
people,
to
yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I said this to an economist who is on the committee that advises the chancellor. Oh, well, we understand they told us that they can turn it into ammonia and bring it. I said, you're already paying so much money to make it hydrogen. Then you're going to pay to make it ammonia. Then you're going to build ships to bring the ammonia here. What are you going to do with ammonia? You know how dangerous 100% ammonia is? You're going to burn this, and I don't get it.
But I tell you, they invest in hydrogen and ammonia, but later on they will call for natural gas because when they get in troubles, they need fossils. So I think, Osama, if you have some time for 3 minutes, I give you one question if you can. Okay, thank you very much. Osama, tell me, do you have, let's say, do we have reliable alternatives to fossils? Do you believe that we have these alternatives to fossils when talking about petrochemistry and some fertilizers? I mean,
I mean, as of today, Shoaib, once again, we do have alternatives like Dr. Thomas was talking about, hydrogen and all those things, the circularity of carbon and CCUS and direct air capture and all those things. But once again, when you look at the charts of, I mean, so there was a very interesting chart by the IEA in their net zero, in their highly ambitious and unrealistic net zero 2050 report, where there were 3 lines. One was going like this, straight up, which said that this is the amount of time we need an increase in the carbon capture and storage systems. Then there was this line in the middle, which showed the increase in carbon emissions. Then there was a straight line, and I read, what is that? That was the total carbon captured by the existing carbon capture system. So I mean, insignificant. There was a straight line, literally straight line. So the point is, I don't know. I don't know what are they thinking. Alternatives are there. Human resilience, of course, will continue to bring up new ways and to find it. But the point is that the crisis we're facing is like right now. So we need some immediate measures. Once again, I would like to highlight, in terms of alternatives, there are two or three things happening. First of all, I've been following the US fracking industry closely, and I have seen some sort of improvements which have ensured oil production, but at the same time, they're sort of trying to tackle the environmental concerns. For instance, there is a considerable shift towards electric frac spreads, e-fracs.
Yes.
Then they have started using tier 4 engine instead of tier 2, which has more mixture, more environmental friendly. Then there are 4-mile lateral wells, the horizontal drilling, the switchback wells. You see right now the rig count is down 40%, the frac spread count is down as well. But the US production, if not rising, is also not falling. It's flatlined, which shows the efficiency gains are holding so far. So one of the things in terms of alternatives would be that we continue to work on efficiency gains, but assure the production of oil and gas, at least until we don't find a viable alternative. But I mean, I of course, I cannot say that we just continue to drill oil and gas. We have to drill that, but at the same time, we need to assure as much as clean, as much as green, or as much as environmentally sustainable it can get. Secondly, in terms of the products, in terms of like ammonia, plastics, rubber, all these things, 80% of the global population live in the developing countries. And I can speak from firsthand experience that we do not have any alternatives to those things. And this is where the second part comes in. It was a theory I explored during my master's in London, Jason Hickel's degrowth theory. And I got a lot of criticism when I wrote about that, especially from Western authors. But I mean, of course, thought is free. But the theory suggests that for instance, there was a recent tweet making rounds where it suggested that a refrigerator in the United States of America, and Dr. O'Donnell can comment on this, it consumes more energy than the whole family in Africa, in the sub-Saharan Africa.